Imagine you are standing at the edge of a quiet desert where the wind whispers through rocky hills and sandy paths. The sky above is a deep, endless blue, and the sun warms your face as you peer into a landscape that has held its secrets for countless generations. It is here, near the shores of a body of water called the Dead Sea, that one of the greatest mysteries in the world of ancient writings was uncovered. We call them the Dead Sea Scrolls. And they are more than just old fragments of paper. They are a window into lost voices, hidden beliefs, and worlds we can hardly imagine. Now let us take a long, slow journey into this story. There is no rush, no need to run through dates or facts as if we are reciting a lesson. Instead, we will wander through these mysteries with open minds and curious hearts. We do not claim to know all the answers. We do not seek to lecture. Rather, we aim to inspire wonder, to invite questions, and perhaps to spark the thrill of discovery that comes when we ask, who wrote these ancient texts, and why did they matter so much? What are the Dead Sea Scrolls? Imagine stumbling upon something tucked away in a dark corner, something so old and fragile that it might crumble if you breathe too hard. That is what the Dead Sea Scrolls are. Delicate manuscripts that were hidden in the desert's embrace for centuries. They are not just one long story, but many different texts, each one written by someone who lived and breathed in times we can hardly picture. There are rules, prayers, poems, letters, and interpretations of older tales that we think we know, but suddenly seem fresh and unfamiliar. These scrolls are like voices carried across time. Even though we do not know exactly who put them there or why, we can guess that those who did so hoped to preserve something precious. Perhaps they knew that the world around them was changing, and they wanted to keep these words safe for future generations, generations like ours, peering curiously into the past. Where were they found? Near the shores of the Dead Sea, there are caves that lie silent and hidden. Picture jagged rocks and narrow entrances, places you might overlook if you did not know what you were looking for. Within these caves, in pots and jars, the scrolls waited. The air inside was dry, still, and quiet, as if the desert itself had decided to shield these fragile manuscripts from storms, floods, and the passing of time. It seems almost like a story out of legend. Simple herders, wandering with their animals, might have stumbled into a cave and found something that looked like old scraps. But those scraps, once examined, proved to be priceless keys to a lost era. The world learned that these texts were not just random scribbles, but a treasure map leading us deeper into the heart of ancient beliefs, dreams, and struggles. What makes them so important? Why do these scrolls command so much attention? Perhaps it is because they offer us a rare chance to listen to voices we thought were long gone. Often, when we look at the past, we rely on stories passed down through many hands. But the Dead Sea Scrolls seem to whisper directly from their own time, without centuries of retelling layered over them. They show us how people once understood their world, their faith, and their history. Think of it like discovering a hidden attic in an old house, filled with letters and diaries that no one has read for ages. Instead of guessing what your ancestors felt, you can read their own words. Instead of relying on second-hand accounts, you see their thoughts, their concerns, and their interpretations right there on the page. That is what these scrolls do. They bring the past alive, allowing us to stand shoulder to shoulder with people who lived so many generations ago. Unveiling the secrets. As we carefully unroll these ancient scrolls, at least in our imagination, we begin to notice something surprising. It is not just that they confirm what we already knew. Instead, they open doors to new rooms in a house we thought we understood. Suddenly, we see that the traditions we consider solid and unchanging were once fluid, debated, and rich with many voices. Insights into Jewish history and beliefs. Within these texts, we find glimpses of Jewish communities at a time when traditions and identities were shifting. There might be prayers that sound familiar yet slightly different, interpretations of ancient stories that do not line up with the ones we have come to accept, or rules for living that remind us that faith and life were deeply intertwined. These scrolls show us not a single unbroken line of belief, but a tapestry woven from many threads. Each thread carries its own patterns, colors, and textures. By looking closely, we realize that the past was never a single voice speaking. It was a chorus filled with harmonies and dissonances alike. A glimpse into early Christian communities. Now pause for a moment and consider, what if some of these texts reveal ideas that echo what we find in early Christian communities? Could these scrolls shed light on the landscape of thought and belief that gave rise to new movements, new visions of what faith could mean? Perhaps the people who wrote these texts were not that different from those who, in time, would shape entire religions. We cannot say for certain which groups influenced which, or how these ideas traveled from one community to another. But the mere possibility that these scrolls hold clues to the mindset of early followers of certain teachings is enough to make us wonder. Imagine a world where spiritual ideas drift like seeds on the wind, planting themselves in unexpected places. The scrolls might be windows into the soil where these seeds first took root, evidence of different interpretations of biblical texts. Many of us grow up hearing biblical stories told in a particular way. We might assume that there is only one way to understand them. But the Dead Sea Scrolls challenge that assumption. They show that even long ago, people wrestled with these stories, reinterpreting and reshaping them to fit their own questions and struggles. These scrolls are like a set of mirrors, each reflecting the same story, but from a different angle. In one reflection, you see a narrative of hope. In another, a tale of warning. In yet another, a path toward comfort. By acknowledging that there were once many understandings side by side, we open our minds to the richness and complexity of ancient thought. The mystery of the Essenes. If we follow the trail of clues, we encounter a group often linked to these scrolls, the Essenes. Who were they? Imagine a community living quietly by the shores of the Dead Sea. Perhaps they dressed differently, ate certain foods, prayed at unusual times, and kept their beliefs tucked close to their hearts. Some believe that they wrote or collected these scrolls, that they were guardians of a certain vision of the world and the divine. Who were the Essenes? Picture a group of individuals who stepped away from the hustle and bustle of the cities, who settled in remote places to devote themselves to prayer, study, and the pursuit of purity. They might have followed strict rules, perhaps waking before dawn to read from their treasured texts. In their eyes, the world needed guidance, clarity, and discipline. They might have seen themselves as keepers of a truth that others had forgotten. We do not know everything about them, if they even existed as some imagine. But the scrolls themselves could be their silent testimony, the legacy of people who wanted to hold on to a particular way of life, a particular understanding of the divine. Perhaps these scrolls were their library, their archive of wisdom. Why did they create the scrolls? Think about this question. If you believed you had discovered a precious truth about the nature of reality, about the will of the divine, about how people should live, would you not try to preserve it? If you saw the world changing in ways that troubled you, might you not hide your knowledge, waiting for a better time when others would be ready to listen? Maybe that is why these scrolls were created and hidden. They could have been a safeguard against forgetting, a hedge against the eroding power of time. If the Essenes believed that future generations would need these words, hiding them in caves by the Dead Sea might have seemed the best way to ensure their survival. What happened to them? We can only guess what happened to the creators of these scrolls. Perhaps they were scattered by conflict or by the shifting tides of history. Maybe they were absorbed into other communities, their traditions blending with others until they disappeared as a distinct group. Or maybe they simply vanished, leaving behind only these fragile texts as clues to their hopes and fears. The silence around their fate only deepens the mystery. The scrolls remain, while their keepers have long since faded into dust. Decoding the scrolls. Deciphering these texts is not as simple as opening a modern book. The words are often in ancient languages, written by hands that followed old forms of spelling, grammar, and style. Over time, the scrolls have suffered. They have cracked, flaked, and faded, like leaves left too long in the sun. Challenges of deciphering the texts. Imagine trying to piece together a puzzle where half the pieces are missing, and the ones that remain are worn and faded. You might need endless patience to sort tiny fragments, each holding just a few letters, uncertain if it belongs to the beginning, middle, or end of a passage. You have no magic map, no clear directions. Instead, you rely on your own intuition, knowledge of ancient languages, and sheer persistence. The use of ancient languages. Many scrolls were written in Hebrew or Aramaic, languages with their own rhythms and secrets. To read them is to step into another time and place, to tune your ears to voices that do not sound like our own. There might be words that no longer exist in modern tongues, phrases that meant something very specific to the people who wrote them down. The challenge is to listen carefully, to let these old voices speak on their own terms, without forcing them into shapes that suit us better. Perhaps by doing so, we learn to respect the past not as a fossil, but as a living conversation. Preservation and restoration efforts. Think of the caretakers who have spent countless hours gently handling these fragments. They wear special gloves, use soft brushes, and study the materials under carefully controlled lighting. They do not rush. They know that these pieces are fragile, that a careless move might erase a letter forever. Preservation is an act of reverence, a form of listening to the past's heartbeat. Restoration might involve high-resolution images, careful cataloging, and repeated attempts to match one piece to another. It is a patient dance between what survives and what we long to understand, a reminder that knowledge is not always easy to grasp. Impact on our understanding of history and religion. When we look at these scrolls and try to understand their significance, we find ourselves rethinking many of our assumptions. We might have thought that the traditions we know today emerged in a straight line, simple and unbroken. But the scrolls remind us that history is not a neat road. It is a winding path, filled with surprising turns and intersections. Rethinking biblical history and tradition. We sometimes treat stories passed down through generations as if they never changed. Yet here we see evidence that people debated, discussed, and reimagined these stories long ago. Could the Dead Sea Scrolls encourage us to approach old tales with fresh eyes, to question what we think we know? These texts might prompt us to ask, who decided which versions of a story would survive? What beliefs were once considered vital but later faded away? How many voices have been lost to time? And how can we honor them by listening carefully to what remains? The scrolls as a source of inspiration and debate. Not everyone agrees on what the scrolls mean or how to interpret them. Scholars have different theories. Some readers see them as keys that unlock hidden rooms within religious traditions, while others see them as intriguing puzzles that do not yield easy answers. This debate is not a sign of failure, it is a sign of life. The scrolls continue to inspire conversation, reflection, and sometimes even disagreement. Imagine a round table where readers from different backgrounds share their thoughts. One person might say, These texts show that a certain tradition was more diverse than we realized. Another might argue they confirm something we long suspected about the people of that time. Yet another might whisper, we will never know for sure, and that is part of the mystery. The ongoing legacy of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Generations from now, readers might still turn to the Dead Sea Scrolls with curiosity. They might find new meanings in these old lines, just as we do now. The scrolls are not frozen in the past. They interact with the present, speaking differently to each new generation. They are like seeds planted in ancient soil, blooming again and again as the centuries pass. This ongoing legacy is a reminder that history is never truly settled. We keep learning, questioning, and discovering. The scrolls invite us to join a conversation that started long before we were born and will continue after we are gone. In this sense, they connect us to a wider tapestry of human experience, binding us to voices that echo across time. Invitation to wonder. As we reach the end of this journey, take a moment to reflect on what we have explored. We began by imagining ourselves at the edge of a quiet desert, drawn toward the whisper of old texts hidden in silent caves. We wondered about who wrote them, why they were hidden, and what truths they hoped to preserve. We considered the Essenes, the challenges of translation, and the delicate work of preservation. We acknowledge that these texts reshape our understanding of the past and spark debates in the present. But most importantly, we celebrated the mystery. The Dead Sea Scrolls remain partly unknown, like distant stars that we can see but not fully grasp. That is their gift. They remind us that life's greatest questions are not always answered easily. They encourage us to cherish curiosity, to approach old stories with open minds, and to allow ourselves the freedom to imagine. Now, as the music rises and we prepare to part ways, hold on to this sense of wonder. Perhaps the next time you think of ancient texts, you will remember the scrolls, their quiet caves, and the voices they carry through the ages. Perhaps you will ask new questions, challenge old assumptions, and keep the conversation alive.